RE2, we're back, of course, talking some FF7. We're talking some Rebirth and probably some other stuff as well. We're going to look at a couple translations from Shin Arc, which I feel like we haven't done in a while. There's like 2 or 3 in particular that I wanted to talk about, but we can also look at a couple others too. A couple of them about Zack, one about the ending of the game, which I feel like we've talked about that before, but we're going to get into that as we get into the video, and just some other random bits, so let's hop into it. Battle Director Endo says there was an additional synergy ability planned for Cloud and Sephiroth. They completed the animations, camera work, and effects. It went unused since it didn't fit with how the Materia Guardian battle is set up. He says it looked so cool. I thought that was kind of cool to know that there's like more synergy abilities out there potentially for Cloud and Sephiroth. Maybe that's something we could see in the next game. I do find it kind of interesting if they went through the effort of making it. Why not just implement it, even if it doesn't make, I guess, sense for the Materia Guardian fight, but also like we had the Cloud Sephiroth simulator fight. So if you already have the move done, like why not put it in there to use? Because you can just use it in the simulator. It doesn't have to make sense. But yeah, since they went through the effort of making it, you know, the camera work, the animations, the effects, like maybe we'll see that in the next game. I'm fine with like the Chadley simulator fights; those are fine. My biggest complaint was, you know, of course, too much Chadley in general, and then obviously the summons being tied to Chadley. But the simulator fights I really enjoy. I love the Cloud Sephiroth, Cloud Zack stuff. Give me like fucking Zack Sephiroth next game. That's what I want. Let's get some mix going. Let's get some other people too. But something I talked about on Twitter at one point, because we have characters like Rufus, for example, that we fought twice now when it comes to the remake project, who have relatively deep move pools. That it'd be kind of cool if we could like use Rufus in the simulator fights, and other characters that might have like, you know, decent move pools like the Turks or something. Moore says he wrote the message that displays at the end of the closing cutscene of FF7 Rebirth. He originally wrote it in Japanese, then chose no promises await at Journey's End from several possible translations because it most closely reflected the original text. He says the meaning is something like the end of the journey isn't promised or the conclusion is still totally undecided. The interviewer notes the word promises also brings to mind the promised land, and Moore says that's also deliberate. He says when he decides on things like this, he tries to allow for a variety of interpretations, and of course it also plays into the theme song No Promises to Keep. For starters, I'm pretty sure we've talked about this before, but I'm not 100% on it. Shin Arc also did another tweet that we've definitely talked about, which was about how they were initially going to end Rebirth on whenever Tifa gets swallowed by the weapon. That was going to be the initial ending at one point, which is insane. We definitely talked about that, and I kind of ranted about that. But I don't know if Shin Arc had tweeted about this before, and maybe he just tweeted it again or something, because they're the main ones we look at. Or if Audrey did it and we covered it, or if we learned some of this info from like interviews or something, but we've 100% talked about Tifa being swallowed by the weapon enemy and that potentially being the ending or the initial ending of the game. And so I feel like we talked about this ending meaning before, whether that's from Nomura or one of the different devs, I don't know. But as for the meaning itself, you know, no promises await at Journey's End, and that meaning that the ending's undecided, as in things could potentially be different in the third game, you know, it's not going to conclude the same as original FF7. I mean, goddamn, that's a subject we talked about ad nauseum, right? A lot. Holy shit. And plus, it's like, it contradicts, because like that's Nomura saying that the third game's ending could be different, right? Whereas you have like more often than not Hamaguchi and Katase, you know, talking about we're not changing anything. You know, we're just retelling FF7. It's like who are we supposed to believe? Should we believe anybody at this point? I don't even fucking know, dude. Like, is the ending going to be literally different from the original FF7? Yeah, absolutely, right? Because this is a reimagining, a retelling of the FF7 story. Is it going to be different in the way that like Zack's alive and Aerith's alive and whatever? No, probably not, right? Because we've been told it's leading into Advent Children, which means if that's the case, Zack's got to be dead. Aerith's got to be dead. The ending of the third game will be different from the ending of the original FF7 because that ended on a cliffhanger, as we talked about a lot, right? Where, you know, you have Holy and Livestream stop a meteor, it just fades to black, right? And then 500 years in the future cutscene at the end of the credits, right? Like, that's how that game ended. We didn't really get any kind of conclusive ending. We'll get something a little more conclusive here. I don't exactly know what, for sure, but we'll get something. As if we'll get more gameplay with Zack compared to Remake, since thousands of people want to play as him, FF7 Rebirth director Naoki Yamaguchi says while he can't say much about Part 3, he'll say that Zack has an impressionable role again and thinks Zack fans will be satisfied. I feel like we've read this one before too. I'm reading that out loud. I feel like I've read that to you guys before, especially that last bit of like Zack fans will be satisfied. I don't know, man. Maybe they're just, you know, using some old translations again. I don't know what's going on. Anyways, the concept of like playing Zack again in the third game, like, yeah, obviously. Maybe, like, legally they can't confirm stuff like that, right? But, I mean, obviously. They gave us so much playable Zack in the second game, and they even teased at the end, right? When they rolled all the different cutscenes at the end after you beat Sephiroth. Like, you know, Zack talks about maybe be able to join worlds again or whatever. So, like, and we got the mystery of, like, what world does Zack wake up in, right? They're not going to give us, like, a playable Zack, especially with, like, the simulator fight, and I guess with the fight, you know, Cloud and Zack versus Sephiroth, where he has his own, like, move sets and limit breaks and, you know, synergy attacks and shit. Like, of course. We're going to get more Zack. Probably going to, potentially, if we get, like, Zack and Aerith, like, meeting up in the fucking live stream worlds type shit, we might get some like team up fights with Aerith and Zack, which I'd never realized until right now. I fucking want that. I'm so looking forward to those two meeting up in the third game. That's one of the main things at this point that I'm looking forward to, and obviously like the live stream sequence with Tifa and Cloud. Also under the Highwind, of course. But yeah, when it comes to the Zack and Aerith relationship, we never got a conclusion to that. We did get to see them kind of together with like Avid children, right? Cloud seeing them, but are they actually interacting with each other? We know they, if you want to look at like the maid who travels the planet as canon, which I don't, I think most people don't. Zack and Aerith do meet up in there, but that wasn't written by Nojima, so who gives a fuck about that? We never really had a conclusion, right? Zack gets captured and she stops writing him letters. They don't see each other for many, many years. And so I've always wanted that, like, that meeting again, right? And also I want a kiss between the characters. But also them fighting side by side. God damn, dude, I want that. How badass is that? Power couple. What I'm kind of picturing is we obviously had, like, Zack helping us fight Bizarro Sephiroth across, like, realities or whatever. And I imagine we might get a similar thing at the very least in the third game with maybe Safer Sephiroth, right? Maybe, like, you solo Cloud again, and then like fucking Aerith and Zack come in to help Cloud fight Sephiroth or some shit, or you get like cuts away to just like Zack and Aerith fighting Safer Sephiroth, kind of like, you know, Zack fought, you know, Bizarre Sephiroth by himself, something along those lines. That's what I'm picturing in my head, and I hope it goddamn happens. Nomura says he personally requested the story about Yuffie's first love in FF7 Rebirth. When he was working on Crisis Core FF7 Reunion, he got to rewatch that scene where Yuffie and Zack meet. He wanted the memory of that encounter to stick with Yuffie. Obviously, if you've seen the Yuffie date scene, maybe specifically the intimate one, she's clearly referencing Zack when she's talking about like previous soldier, that she, you know, did the whole punch thing and he pretended to be hurt or whatever. That's pretty obvious. I never, I guess, took it that was like her first love or something.
I had a thing for a soldier once. At least I think he was a soldier. I wanted to prove myself, so I hit him with my best moves. It was like I was firing energy blasts. After a few salvos, he shouted, "You got me!" And at the time, I totally bought it. Of course, he was just playing along for a dumb kid. And once I realized that, I was pissed. I couldn't stop thinking about him. I swore to myself that one day I'd blast that jerk for real. Did some hardcore training so I could give him a beatdown. But eventually, it dawned on me. He was just being nice. Like, he was a really nice guy. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, wow, I liked him. You know?
Clearly by the scene, you can tell that she has like some level of feelings for who we know to be Zack, right? But I just never took that very brief interaction they had in Crisis Core as like this like life-altering moment for her, because she talks about it like she started training to like fight him one day or whatever because she realized that he was like pretending to be her, right? But it's like, it's a very brief scene in Crisis Core, and every other follow-up scene between Yuffie and Zack, to the best of my memory, is optional because it's like the mission system in Crisis Core, right? You only meet her at the very beginning, like in the Fort Tambo mission. That's like the actual scene you get. And I believe every other interaction they have is optional. So that was kind of an interesting, I guess, piece of information that she's like in love with Zack or something. I've seen the date scene before, like I said. I just didn't take it like that kind of serious, but it's like a big deal they wanted to, I guess, have in the game or whatever. I guess it'd be kind of a little more interesting if we ever have any interaction with Zack and the main party in the third game, by whatever means that might be. Because I did mention before, like some time ago on the channel, that I did want that. I want to have like, you know, the interaction with Zack and like the party, just interact with characters never interacted with before, but also like Zack and Tifa talking, just because of obviously the Nibelheim incident, but also Zack and Yuffie talking because they met, you know, however many years ago. Was that like 7 years ago? She's like 16 in FF7, like 9 years old in Crisis Core. Speaking of that, by the way, there's people that ship Yuffie with other characters with in FF7. It's like, she's a kid. She's 16 in FF7. She's 9 years old in Crisis Core. If you go under like the Shin R tweet, there's literally people talking about the Zack and Yuffie ship, and it's like, holy shit, she's a child, even by the FF7 timeline. A lot of people, when you give them shit about like shipping Yuffie with like Cloud, for example, like their argument a lot of times is, well, she's 18 and having children. It's like, so your argument is that the child will be of legal age eventually, so it's okay. That's your argument? Pretty gross. Let's stop shipping Yuffie with really anybody from the main party, but specifically people that aren't near her age. That'll be pretty much the video, my dudes. Of course, pass off to you guys. What are your thoughts on, I guess, the words at the end of the game? No promises await at journey's end. Doesn't matter. Is there going to be new shit? Is there not going to be new shit? What do they want us to fucking think? I've heard a theory before that the devs do this shit maybe intentionally, as in like trying to they themselves be unreliable narrators, kind of like Cloud is in the story, which I think is at a certain point I feel like it's a decent theory because of the contradicting info we get sometimes. I guess also, what are your thoughts on Zack being playable in the next game? I mean, obviously he's going to be, but I guess they want to keep that ambiguous. And by the way, that's the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. System works in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @davidYT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine, or leave it like Cobain.